Before dawn's first rosy glow painted the eastern sky, Maple Brook lay wrapped in the hushed stillness of early spring. Mist clung to the rippling water, drifting in wisps through alder and willow trunks, and the air smelled of damp earth, moss, and new growth. Baxter the beaver, his glossy pelt dark as wet driftwood, emerged from his lodge, paddling into the gentle current atop his flat, scaly tail. With whiskers quivering, he sampled the brook's sweetness, then hauled himself onto the muddy bank to inspect his dam's sturdy weave of willow branches and packed mud. But this morning, the brook's familiar symphony of dripping water and birdsong was broken by a harsh, alien roar. Baxter froze, ears flattened against his head as a distant motor growled and rasped. He twitched his nose. The acrid tang of freshly cut wood drifted downstream, mingling with the pine resin he loved. Instinct prickled along his spine. Smoke, splintered logs, and an approaching threat to the forest canopy he called home. Clambering onto his dam, Baxter chattered a sharp alarm call, an urgent squeak that echoed across the water. From the cattail marsh beyond, sandpipers and herons lifted in startled flocks, wings beating frenetic rhythms as they sought safer perches. On the far bank, his mate emerged, tails slapping the surface in agreement, while their kits scuttled toward the lodge's entrance, wide-eyed and bristling with curiosity. Baxter turned his gaze upstream where the pines and firs stood tall and unbroken at sunrise's edge. Yet today, the skyline was jagged, sawdust ribbons drifted through the shafts of light, and barren stumps marked the site of freshly felled giants. A row of heavy machinery, skid loaders and a steel-tracked harvester, lurched from stump to stump, disgorging massive cedar logs in jagged heaps. Men in high-visibility jackets shouted, axes and chainsaws flashing in the half-light. The beaver's heart hammered as he watched a towering fir topple with a thunderous crash, its crown crashing into its brethren like a felled sentinel. As the tree's weight slammed into the earth, the soil trembled beneath Baxter's paws. Water sloshed against the dam's upstream face. His claws dug into the packed mud as he calculated the looming danger. Without the forest's canopy to hold the hillside soil, stormwater runoff would surge unchecked, threatening to overtop his dam and drain the marsh. Baxter signaled again, an urgent tail slap that sent a spray of droplets across the dam crest. His mate and kits froze at his side, sensing the gravity of the crisis. Beyond the apex of the dam, the brook's normal sluice would soon swell into a torrent, gouging new channels through the wetland and stranding the waterfowl that depended on its gentle flow. In that solemn dawn light, Baxter vowed to defend his home. He would not merely rebuild, but reinvent the very course of Maple Brook to protect the fragile wetlands and all who dwelt within them. And so, as the logging machines roared on, the master builder slipped back into the water, determination shining in his dark eyes. The battle to save his habitat had begun. Night draped Maple Brook in inky velvet, pierced only by the silvery glow of a waning moon. Under its cool light, Baxter slipped from his lodge onto the slick mud of the bank, every whisker trembling at the dam's trembling timbers. He climbed onto the crest of his weathered lodge dam and surveyed the scarred hillside where towering pines had fallen like soldiers in a lost battle. The brook's water, once a gentle ribbon, now lapped hungrily at the crest, threatening to breach and drain the marsh beyond. With a measured breath, nose twitching to catch the faint scent of fresh-cut timber, Baxter dove beneath the surface and re-emerged at the brook's edge downstream. There he began gathering materials for a bold new design. First came slender willow shoots, still pliant from the spring thaw. He gnawed through their bases, stripping each branch's leaves and side twigs, then set to weaving them into thick, interlaced wands. These would form the dam's new skeleton, a living framework more flexible and resilient than the hewn pines stacked by the loggers. Next, Baxter scavenged thick trunks of alder blown down in a winter storm. With expert incisors, he carved off the smooth bark, exposing the pale wood within. He dragged lengths of alder across his back to the bank's stoniest stretch, an area rimmed with river-worn cobbles that shone like polished pebbles in the moonlight. There, he worked the larger logs into position as anchors, their mass sunk into the creek bed to buttress the dam's upstream face. Pushing aside mud and silt with powerful forepaws, Baxter created pockets between the alder trunks and the existing lodge base. Into these he stuffed fistfuls of willow weave, then rammed the seams tight with packed mud and clay gathered from the brook's bed. Each handful of clay he pressed firmly, teeth bared in determination as water seeped through minor gaps. He sealed each leak with more mud until the once rustling trickle subsided into a calm pool. But the masterstroke lay in Baxter's final addition, a diversion channel. He gnawed a shallow trench beside the dam's south flank, angling it to meet an abandoned oxbow loop of the brook. Into this channel he placed stout alder posts at regular intervals, weaving willow between them to form a guiding vein. Above each vein he balanced flat stones, river-smoothed and heavy, to slow the swirling flow and prevent erosion of the new channel's banks. As the moon reached its zenith, Baxter tested his handiwork. He climbed onto a vantage point atop a moss-covered boulder and watched the water's course. The main channel, once swollen, now backed up gently before splashing over the reinforced dam, its crest held firm, while the diversion siphoned off the excess, guiding the rush of stormwater safely into the oxbow's sheltered curve. A chorus of croaking frogs and the rattling flight of waterfowl returning to roost greeted Baxter's triumph. He let out a low, satisfied chitter, tail slapping the water's surface in celebration. His new blueprint of wood, stone, and earth would protect the marsh from fury wrought upstream and stand as a living barrier against the loggers' heedless advance. Under the lantern glow of fireflies, Baxter paddled back to his lodge, heart steady with pride. Dawn's first light would reveal a brook reborn by his ingenuity, and a wetland saved by the master builder who refused to yield even to the roar of chainsaws. Before sunrise, a deep rumble echoed through the valley as the loggers returned to the felled pine stands above Maple Brook. Heavy machinery, a yellow skid loader and a tracked harvester outfitted with a spinning sawhead, crunched along the rutted logging road, its diesel exhaust mingling with the sharp scent of pine resin. Baxter watched from the water's edge, his flat tail pressed to the mud, ears flattened against his head. He sensed the danger. Without intervention, the newfound floodwaters would carve a new channel straight through his wetland, draining the marsh he'd fought so hard to protect. As the skid loader edged down to the brook's intake culvert, the operator revved the engine and lowered a metal culvert gate, intent on diverting the spring surge toward the roadbed for easier log extraction. That was Baxter's cue. With a sharp chitter, he darted upstream to the old section of his original lodge dam, now weakened by constant seepage and loggers' runoff. His powerful incisors found the aged willow and mud pack, and with a single decisive bite, he began gnawing through the dam's core. The sudden breach hissed open, and water, once held at a gentle pool, surged forward in a roaring cascade. Baxter's mates and kits leaped back as the stream rose, roiling white-capped over the dam crest. The logger at the culvert froze, wrench in hand, as the water ricocheted off the gate and gushed across the forest floor. Moments later, the flood spilled onto the logging road, collecting in deep potholes and furrows carved by the harvester's tracks. The skid loader's wide tires spun helplessly, spraying mud in wide arcs, while the harvester's tracks gouged deeper into the saturated earth. The operator slammed the brake, boots thudding on the heavy steel deck as water flooded the cab floor, shorting out circuitry and drenched controls. "What the?" he roared, kicking at the door in frustration. His co-worker tried to scramble back up the bank, but the churning water tugged at his boots and he yelped as he lost his grip. Amid the chaos, Baxter paddled downstream to the new diversion channel he'd cut the night before. The excess current funneled neatly along his alder and stone guide, sparing the marsh beyond while leaving the loggers' road a churning quagmire. Mired tires spun fruitlessly. The harvester's engine cough-stuttered and died as water soaked the air intake. The two men abandoned their machines, wading through knee-deep mud toward higher ground, wrenching open the skid loader's door to escape the deluge. Standing on a protruding root, Baxter thumped his tail once against the water's surface, his victory trumpet. Downstream, waterfowl that had lurked in reeds took to the air in joyful squawks, and the frogs' chorus rose in celebration. The loggers looked back at the flooded road in disbelief, then trudged away through the pines, boots slurping in the mud, realization dawning that this territory was defended not by fences or laws, but by the unyielding will of a single beaver whose mastery of wood and water had turned their machinery against itself. By midday, conservation officers arrived to find the logging machine stranded and the brook flowing safely along Baxter's engineered course. The channel held firm, The marsh remained full, and the logging threat had been undone by nature's own engineer. Baxter settled back into the water, whiskers twitching with satisfaction. His blueprint in wood and stone had once again proven stronger than chainsaws and steel. By mid-morning, the flooded logging road had drawn a small crowd of onlookers, conservation officers in green uniforms, tribal rangers with carved walking staffs, and a handful of local residents who'd raced out when they saw the waters rise. Baxter the Beaver watched from the safety of the thicket, his sleek muzzle barely visible above the rippling current. His newly forged diversion channel carried the bulk of the spring runoff around the marsh, leaving the road an impassable mire. Lieutenant Harris of the Wildlife Protection Agency strode forward, badge gleaming on his chest. He called out to the stranded loggers, two burly men trudging through waist-deep mud. "Stop right there! You're operating without permits in a protected wetland." His voice was firm, echoing in the damp air. The younger logger, slick with mud, spat a curse and brandished an oil-stained chainsaw. "This is private land! No beaver's dam's gonna stop me from logging my trees." At the brink of conflict, tribal elder Mwangi stepped between them, raising a gnarled staff carved with ancestral symbols. "These wetlands are sacred," he intoned in a low, resonant voice. "The water sustains our people and the creatures you would harm. This beaver's work has saved our marsh. You will respect it." His tone brooked no argument. Lieutenant Harris produced the official notice, a cleanly typed warrant from the Department of Natural Resources, signed that morning by the regional judge. "Under Section 12 of the Wetlands Protection Act, logging in any wetland without written authorization is illegal," he declared, handing the warrant to the stunned logger. "Your equipment is impounded, and you're ordered to vacate immediately." The loggers glowered, but the rising floodwaters lapped at their boots, reminding them that nature, not bureaucracy, held the upper hand. With grudging curses, they abandoned their harvester and skid loader in the muddy trench, slamming doors that groaned and popped as the water pooled on the floor. The younger man tried to kick at Baxter's engineered diversion, but the distance and swift current kept him from tampering with the sturdy alder and stone barrier. As the conservation officers secured the logging machinery with heavy chains and seized placards, Baxter paddled closer to shore, whiskers twitching with relief. A drone hummed overhead, deployed by the agency to map the new water flow. And the footage would later show Baxter's master blueprint, how his willow-woven skeleton dam funneled excess water around the road, protecting both road and wetland. Behind the officers, sandpipers and herons returned to the marsh's edge, dipping their beaks into the safe pooled shallows. Frogs croaked among the sedges, and dragonflies skimmed the water's surface. Elder Mwangi nodded to Baxter, voice warm. "Well done, engineer. You have shown us how to build with respect for life." Lieutenant Harris turned to his team. "We'll file charges for illegal logging and order restoration of the felled trees. This entire area is now under protected status." The officers cheered quietly, then set to work marking out a protected zone around Baxter's dam and the surrounding marsh. As the sun climbed higher, its rays dancing on the diverted channel's gentle riffles, Baxter retreated to the lodge, tail thumping twice in quiet triumph. He knew the battle was not truly over. Nature must be vigilantly defended, but for now, his engineering had prevented disaster and brought humans to stand in awe of what a single beaver could achieve. In the hush that followed, the restored brook sang its glad song, and all who listened understood that sometimes the smallest architects could wield the greatest power. Weeks passed, and Maple Brook blossomed under the guardianship of Baxter's masterwork. Wildflowers carpeted the banks in a riot of gold and violet, columbine, buttercups, and lupine nodding in the gentle breeze, while marsh marigolds gleamed like living embers at the water's edge. The diverted channel had settled into a natural curve, its willow-reinforced banks firm against erosion, and the restored wetland buzzed with life. Dragonflies skimmed the water's surface, frogs croaked in chorus beneath lily pads and painted. Turtles basked on sun-warmed logs. Early one crisp morning, a small group of schoolchildren from the nearby village lined up behind a newly built boardwalk that curled above the marsh. Their teacher, Ms. Hernandez, held a laminated map of Baxter's dam blueprint and pointed excitedly to the alder logs and woven willow fascia that still held fast beneath the water's surface. "See how the water flows around the marsh now?" she asked, guiding the children's gaze to the gentle riffle of the diversion channel. The children gasped in wonder as a family of mallards paddled through the clear shallows, the ducklings peeping in contented frenzy. At the boardwalk's end stood an interpretive kiosk, a polished oak stand topped with a weatherproof sign etched in relief. Above a detailed diagram of Baxter's reinforced dam, the plaque read, "Baxter's Legacy. This wetland remains alive thanks to the ingenuity of the master builder who reshaped the water's path. May we learn to work with nature, not against it." Two rangers in forest green uniforms joined the group, tallying species sightings and filling clipboards. One ranger tapped the sign thoughtfully, then peered into the undergrowth. "He should be here somewhere," she murmured. Suddenly the water's surface rippled, and there, emerging from the lodge entrance, was Baxter himself, whiskers glistening, tail poised for another slap of greeting. The children held their breath as Baxter paddled to the lodge's bank, climbed ashore with graceful effort, and approached the boardwalk's railing. With a dignified nod, he slapped his tail once against the mud, a signal the children had learned meant all is well. Laughter and applause broke out as Ms. Hernandez encouraged the children to whisper their thanks. Baxter surveyed the gathered humans with wise, dark eyes, then vanished back into the lodge's entrance, his work quietly complete. As the sun climbed higher, the boardwalk filled with hikers, birdwatchers, and families, all pausing to read the kiosk and marvel at the engineering feats hidden beneath the water's surface. Canoes glided along the broadened creek. Fishermen cast lines without fear of a vanishing channel, and the surrounding forest hummed with renewed vitality. In every ripple and reed, in every fluttering wing and croaking frog, Baxter's presence was felt. An enduring reminder that when one small builder stands firm, an entire ecosystem can flourish.